Hello and welcome to another episode of the Worship Hearts podcast. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. If you are just joining us in this series, this is episode 5 or 6, but it's also part 3 of our conversation with Pastor Chris Legg of South Spring Baptist Church, and we are discussing temple worship, in particular the Old Testament to New Testament almost contrast, but really fulfillment. It just looks very different. But the fulfillment of the law and the instruction given by God to the Israelites in the Old Testament, um, in retrospect to the instruction that Jesus talks about in John chapter 4 with the woman at the well, where he says, listen, it's not going to be about where you worship, it's how you worship. And that should be in spirit and in truth. This week, like I mentioned, is part 3 with Pastor Chris, and the conversation shifts a little bit. We had been talking about a lot of the details of the items within the temple, from the bread table to the Ark of the Covenant itself, and some of the items within it. And this week we shift in that to more of the New Testament aspects of it, but even beyond that to the modern church, the modern Western church in particular, and kind of what we've gotten right, what we've missed on a little bit. I think you'll very much enjoy the conversation. There'll be a short little recap right here at the front of the episode, and then we'll dive right into the conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. And if you wouldn't mind, leave us a comment down below. What do you think about the conversation? Do you like having special guests on the episodes? Let us know. We'd love to hear from you and your feedback. But with all that out of the way, let's get to the conversation.
Mean, and it's kind of interesting because, and this makes sense. Jesus seems to talk about the flesh as weakness. I think it's the pathetic little child in each of us that just doesn't. I just want to feel better. I'm cold and I don't want to be cold. I'm hungry and I don't want to be hungry. I'm lonely and I don't want to be lonely.
Right.
And so I'm going to turn to whatever makes those feelings go away right now. I don't care about the morality of it. I feel lonely, so I'm going to look at something inappropriate on my devices. I feel hungry, so I'm going to eat a fourth donut. Or, well, you're not hungry if you're a fourth. I just want a fourth donut, so I want it. I just want what I want, and I want it now. And I think that's maybe that's similar to what Freud called the id or whatever. That there's just something in us that Jesus acknowledges that's just weak and pathetic. It's just the child. But Paul, because I think he experiences the fullness of the flesh, he thinks that he sees it more as an enemy. Like, I have to beat it into submission. I have to remind it who's boss around here. And I've got to fast sometimes just in order to remind my flesh, you're not in charge. And so I think I think that battle is when I sit and try to focus the troubles, if I could quote Jesus, the troubles of the world, they distract me. I read about the great, saints, even just in the last century. I'm, smoking a cigar like I'm Spurgeon or something, but the guys like him would say stuff like, I have so much to get done today that I can't imagine getting it all done without at least 3 hours of prayer. And I think, I don't get that. My flesh has not submitted to the Spirit to that degree,
Right.
where I embrace that. And they're just humans. They're just humans who are just further along the path, I guess. But I think that's a big part of it, is that it's not easy for us because we are frail creatures of dust. And I think the good news about that is that teaches us to rely on him. Like, even when I'm doing what's right, I can't even do that right. And so I can't even pray right. I can't preach right. I can't prepare right. I can't sit and have this conversation right. But this is cool. Is I think sometimes we grow up with this mentality that God is very easily frustrated with us, that he's, and I'm not meaning to bring up anything therapeutic here for fathers and sons, but the idea that it's a natural tendency as a dad or whatever dad we grew up with that he sends us to go get a wrench and we come back with pliers. Sometimes dads can lose their temper in that moment and be like, I said, they're under the car and they're holding back oil that's dripping down their arm, and
Yeah.
and they're like, "No, kid, I said a wrench. Like, what's wrong with you? I said a wrench." Or what are you, stupid? Or we
Sure.
let go and we go get the wrench ourselves. Like, you're such a failure, and we communicate. And what we have to remember about God is when God sends us to get a wrench, He already knows we're coming back with pliers.
Yeah.
I mean, He knew when He sent us, like, "Hey, go do this." I mean, you're going to totally just destroy that, but do it because apparently getting it done perfectly isn't His highest priority if He asks us to do it.
Man.
And if the things that have to be done right, creation, redemption, glorification, judgment, He reserves those for Himself because He can't trust us to do
Yes.
those.
Yeah.
But all the other things, He'd be a better husband than I am, a better dad than I am, a better pastor than I am, a better guest on a podcast than I am, and yet He's allowed me to do those. Apparently, He doesn't need them done right, or He wouldn't have asked me to do them. And so I just have to fall on Him in the midst of each of those and go, "I'm counting on you to do something with this."
Right.
Because and that's okay. So, okay, another one. Sorry.
No.
So our worship pastor, John Redfern, he oversees all our kind of worship stuff, and a whole other podcast for you guys someday might be the fact that he had been leading worship for years, and then his voice went away. He lost his voice, and so here he is, lead worship pastor, and he can't sing. It's just gone. We don't even know exactly what happened, and so he's having to recreate what it means for him to lead people in worship when he can't
Right.
sing. And how does he raise up a whole generation of people to accomplish the philosophy? Anyway, whole other podcast. But the first time I heard him teach about, and I don't know how you feel about this, but the Greek word worship, I'm not a Greek expert, proskuneo, that a lot of people think the middle word in that is the word skylos, which means dog. And that the picture of proskuneo is, and some people say the word hand is also woven in there, and I'm not enough of a Greek scholar to know what that would be. But that you're supposed to picture worship as like a dog. And so I did this in a service because I used to have a dog that would do this, is that I called the dog down to the front of the room and I just held my hands out like this. And the first thing she did was stick her nose in one hand and then stick her nose in the other hand. And I think there's supposed to be a picture of worship is like we come to God and go, "What do you got for me?"
Mm.
And I loved her. She was a great example of this because she was a dog that, the heartworm medication, I would tell her name was Molly. And I was like, "Molly, sit." I would hand her the heartworm medication and she would just eat it. And she'd have that look on her face of like, that was not good.
Yeah.
But she lived under the assumption that if it came out of my hand, it must be what she needs,
Wow.
even if she didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
I've never had another dog, no other dog. Every other dog, I'm like,
Yeah.
that, which is probably how God feels about me. Like, hold still, covering my mouth and nose to make me swallow it. But I think we're just bent our own way. I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on that too, because we're unwrapping this right now, even as a church.
That's awesome. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I'm still processing some of it as well. It's I definitely would love to have him on for a podcast because I've heard bits and pieces of that story, but I'd love to hear the whole thing.
Yeah.
And to see what God's doing and moving in his life and in the church because of it. It worship. I mean, this is the Worship Hearts podcast, so we're discovering what it means to worship and worship well and to be effective worship leaders in the process. Because if we don't know as worship leaders, how are we supposed to lead others in worship?
Right.
So,
Yes.
man, it is. I think it has a lot to do with knowing who God is and knowing who Christ is, and and asking the questions like, okay, Old Testament, very specific instructions about worship. New Testament, Jesus kind of shoves it all aside and says, "Yes, but it's
Yeah.
also this."
Right.
And having these difficult discussions, and interesting and uh, wonderful discussions about what that means and how that looks, is possibly as much worship as standing in church on Sunday morning and raising your hands and singing out. I mean,
Yeah.
we're this is as much fellowship and communion in this discussion,
Sure.
and and I
Yeah.
love that about it.
Learning, giving, greeting,
Right.
teaching,
Yeah,
serving, stacking chairs. I mean, I think everything is, if in done in spirit and truth, is worship. I mean, I think it's an expression of that. And how do we invite people to do that well in a church setting is, I mean, that's tough. The invitation, that's the
yeah,
hard. I mean, the worship is, we actually have been discussing, I mean, this may be a whole other topic, but because we don't have this defined, build this, light it at this time, put it out at this time, make it this size. These are the four ingredients that go into the incense. Don't put anything else in it. I
yeah.
mean, it feels like God saying, okay, Sunday morning, we need to have, it's contemporant time, and we need to have, you remember contemporant, that video that was the opening song? Opening song? No?
I don't
Okay,
know
you can
that
look
one.
up contemporant. Oh, God.
Didn't get
Thanks a
that
lot.
one, but keep going. I'm enjoying
But
it.
you do you first you do an opening song. It gets everybody in the room. It gets everybody kind of seated. They now know. Then you do the announcements. They've got to be
Oh
a little
yeah, that's
edgy, and then and then we've got the song that's, it's the new song that no one's ever heard before, and then you've got the song that's on the CD from the worship leader that's for sale in the book sale, and like the God's like, here's, and then listen, 4 minutes, no longer. That
Right.
Yep.
opening song needs to be 4 minutes, no longer. But
Yeah.
think about when he says, there's going to come a day when my law will be written on your heart, not on a
Mm.
tablet. And so that's what we're supposed to be, I think, trying to figure out, which is in some ways way harder. It's so much freer, but the room for error grows so high.
Well, and
Yeah.
that's a part of where my brain goes in this process is, especially in the Western church, do we have it all wrong? Like, I mean, we've got churches that have tens of thousands of people in attendance every week. We have churches that have 10 people in attendance every week.
Right?
And does it have to be 10:30 in this building on a Sunday
It
morning?
can't be.
Yeah, like,
No. Yeah, so I'm one of those guys. I got in trouble because I was at something, and some guy said, like, listen, church is not some holy huddle. And I know what he meant. Know what he meant. But I said, actually, I think that's exactly what a church service is. Are you implying that the church service is the game? Because I
Mm,
don't think it's the game. I think the game is everything but, it's an embassy where ambassadors gather.
Yeah.
Ambassadors gather to get marching orders at the
Yeah.
embassy, and then they leave the embassy and they go be strangers in a strange land.
oh man.
Like,
Right.
it kind
Right.
of is a holy huddle. Listen, then no one's, hopefully, I mean, blessings, you won't get hit in church. You don't get hit in the huddle. That's the
Right.
one space now, unfortunately, we're jacked up humans, and so that doesn't work out that way
Yeah.
always. But that's the plan, is church should be the one place you can go, man, I don't have it
Yeah.
all together.
Should be
Yeah.
the
How
safe place.
sad.
Yeah.
How sad that we've created a world where you got to be scrubbed pink, which already indicates a problem, but you got to be scrubbed pink, have your best shoes, have your best behavior. I mean, I was raised with that. Like, now listen, you act good in church.
Yeah.
Like, now I'm like, I feel like the church is the one place where you maybe don't have to quite get it right. Anyway,
Oh yeah. That
Yeah.
so speaking of plugging other podcasts, there is one that's, I think it's called the 167 or something like that, but it's in reference to the other 167
yes,
hours in the
yes,
week that we're
yes,
supposed to be the church. It's not
yes.
just about that 1 hour on Sunday mornings. Yes, I love that shirt. I absolutely love that shirt.
The church has left the building. That was our
I,
COVID themed shirt.
Oh man.
I need to get one of those. Need to get
All
one
right.
of those.
What size?
So
See if we can dig one up.
yeah. So in how do
Okay.
how do I word
You're
this question?
going to try to connect it back.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yes, because we have the Old Testament instruction, we
Yes.
have the New Testament instruction from Jesus
Fulfillment,
that
right?
says the fulfillment that says it's more than just this place or that place,
Yes.
and now it feels like we have gotten back to this, you know, whatever the church address at 10:30 on a Sunday morning kind of an attitude. How do we invert that? How do we turn people out? How do we begin to remind people that they are the church, they are the tabernacle, they are the
Yeah.
ark, and it is as important, it's more important to be the church when you're not in the church building
Yeah.
than it is for you to be like Jesus in the building, because that's where I mean, you go to the hospital
It's
because you're
all
sick.
real. It's all that's right. It's all real. One isn't there doesn't need to be a competition or a dichotomy.
Yeah.
You are the church at the church, you're the church outside of the church. It is we have to and I think part of it is what you use the correct Hebrew concept, and that is remind. It is to remember.
Mm,
It's one of those themes that we have to come back to month after month, song after song, sermon after sermon, lesson after lesson, that we continue to integrate the truth of that, in that, like, we are the church, and they will know us by our love for each other,
mm,
and we are the church, and they will know us when we love them. And those aren't in opposition to each other. We speak the truth in love. We
Mhm.
proclaim the gospel, that we proclaim our faith in love. Like, those are not meant to be contradictory. And so here's what gets me: if you follow the logic of the book of Hebrews, as I would like to think I do, then all of these things, all of these tabernacle devices, all of the putting in the oil, all of that, those were just actions that communicated devotion and faith, which is what he counts as righteousness. That was true
mm,
of Abraham. It's true of us. And so the fact that our methods, that he doesn't prescribe the same methods to us, doesn't mean the message or the purpose isn't the same.
Right.
I think there's a little bit of, like, God was ready for the consummation, not just the dating.
mm.
So it's like, I am ready for I am. It is now time to take the step into the consummation, the fulfillment. Let's end this engagement and let's get married. And so that's the bride, and that all whose faith is integrated there. And I think we are, in some weird sense, we are doing the same thing spiritually when we sing, when we pass the plate, when we give, or at least I should say this way: we are invited to do the same thing spiritually. We may not be, that's between us and God.
Yeah.
But we're invited to the same thing as the people of Israel were when they were dragging a lamb up to the tabernacle. Is we're being invited to do the same thing spiritually, even though the physical representation of that spiritual act has changed. Because keep in mind, we say that, but Paul went to the temple. I assume
Mhm.
Paul still went through many of the same behaviors.
Yeah.
Um, Jesus spent a lot of time for a guy who said, "We worship in spirit and truth. The day is coming and is here." That's in John 4. How many
Yeah.
times through the rest of John do you find him in the temple? It's not like he's
Right.
like, "So now we burn it to the ground." No,
Right.
they're not in
Right.
competition with each other. They are a culmination of the same concept. So that I think that's part of, if we help people realize, because this is the pressure the world is putting on right now, is, listen, your faith, that's great. Just kind of keep it to yourself. That's fine in your room. That's fine in your church. At least for now, that's fine. Eventually that will probably come under attack too.
Yeah.
But, like, just keep that there. It should not influence the way you vote. It should influence the way you work. It should influence the way you pay your taxes. It should influence the way you do business. And sadly, a lot of Christians are buying that,
Yeah.
rather than
Right.
saying, nope,
Yeah.
at no point does who we are in
Right.
Christ disintegrate
That's
from
right.
who we are.
Right.
Oh yeah,
And
man.
even take that further is, you're saying uh, prior to Christ's coming, it was an engagement. Christ is here. He spent those years. Uh, it's time to get married. So for 3 years or so. And then it was not until the Holy Spirit that he gave to us to be able to live out as ambassadors, as
Mhm.
representatives of who he was. How much how much more difficult is it then to actually be a representative of who you're
Right.
married to?
Oh yeah. I mean, what do we think those little flames were above their head? Those were pillars of fire.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Those tongues of flame were little pillars of fire. That was the whole. Okay, this is now my guiding light. So
man.
And it
it
wasn't
all
just the disciples. There was 120 people in that room.
absolutely.
And we jumped way ahead. So
That's-
so we may have to back up a little bit here.
Yeah.
So
oh
but
man.
no, I mean the reality of it really is, and this is why I'm wondering if there's just a little bit of trepidation or can we just call it fear in a representation, or saying that I'm a Christian. What? Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm a Christian. No, I mean, if you're gonna be,
Right. Right.
wear it, be it, live it,
yeah,
and you don't have to be obnoxious about
That's
it,
right. That doesn't mean that. First Peter makes that clear.
but you certainly don't have to be timid about it.
Right.
yeah.
And so I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us all. And again, thank you, Pastor Chris, for being here with us.
Oh man,
I
yeah.
know we've gone a long time. Even if we turn this into 4 sections, I think we'll
As
run
many
long.
as you want.
But man, what a blessing it has been to I look forward to the day we get to shake hands
I do too.
in
That'd be
fellowship
great.
as well. So, but what a blessing it has been to have you with us. Thank you,
I really
Matt,
appreciate the
for getting
invite.
this
I really
together.
do.
And
Yeah.
maybe a few
Let me
months down the road, we can do it again for something else. So,
I would
Yeah.
love to. And let me quick comment in case people want to look up. So you said you're going to put southspring.org in the thing.
Yes. Yes.
chrismleg.com is my personal website, and pretty much every week I publish an article about something. Usually it's just whatever I care about. So if you're really, really tired and you can't fall asleep, it helps a lot. And then I really am pleased with our Reconstructed Faith podcast that we do through the church as well. So these will be my 3 little advertisements. Is like,
that's awesome.
and we'd love to have people look those up and be involved. I really appreciate this. I love. I was glad to be introduced to you guys and to get to look you up and get to follow along with these last few episodes. And I'll be encouraged to. I'll be yelling at these podcasts next time whenever I'm on it, going like, "Why you left this out? What were you thinking? What was I
Oh,
thinking?" Anyway,
well, and that's I think that's a part of the beauty of this as well, because I think Dad, if left to our own devices, typically Dad and I could probably talk for 3 hours about one little thing, and
fantastic. Great gift.
it's
Good job, Dad.
oh
with
man,
with a few rabbit trails. I mean, it might be
there's a couple,
might be a
yeah,
few.
there's a couple, but no, as Dad said, and yes, I'm so grateful that you were able to set aside some time to be with us. I will probably break this up into maybe 2, maybe 3 episodes, just so that it's in a little smaller bites. We
That's
had
good. That's smart.
actually kind of 3 really nice sections that I think will be pretty easy to break apart anyway. So, thank you so much.
Very good.
Yes, I will have all of the links for everything in the notes and whatnot, so people can find you and find the church, all that good stuff. Thank you so much
So
for
good.
being with us.
Thank you, Matt, Rob. Good to see
Thank
you guys,
you.
pastors. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. The end of part 3, the end of an incredible conversation that I was privileged to be a part of. The hopefully not the forever end of having Pastor Chris on the podcast. I enjoyed that very much. I know Dad did as well, and we hope you did also. We hope you learned something. I know that I did. The more I dug into this stuff, the more we talked, the more I learned and understood, the more I realized how little I know about the Jewish culture at that time, and how much of it should parallel and be involved in our modern worship, even at that. So, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for joining in the conversation as well. And thank you for supporting us. That you do just that by listening and sharing out this video. And so thank you very much for being with us. If you have any questions for Pastor Chris, for Dad or I, feel free to shoot us a message. You can email us at messageworshiphearts@gmail.com. And you can also just leave a comment right here in the video. Also, if you are interested in any of the resources that Pastor Chris talked about, there will be links in the description as well for that. So, thank you again for being with us. We'll see you next time.